Jerusalem lost God. On the very night Babylonian soldiers entered the temple and found nothing inside. No throne, no fire, not a trace of the Ark of the Covenant. Only the hollow echo inside the holiest room ever built by human hands, a room that once held the beating heart of the divine. And from that moment, the world believed the Ark was gone. But the silence lied. It didn't vanish. It was taken. Taken from the land bleached holy, back to an Africa more radiant than the gold of Ophir, back to Ethiopia, where a black man has kept watch for 3,000 years, awaiting the day God's Spirit is called home after all this time. The southern wind over Jerusalem that day was not like other days. It carried red dust, the scent of distant frankincense, and a strange resonance like stone bells echoing from a valley without a name. Solomon sat alone in a sealed chamber, eyes half closed, fingers tracing ivory blocks carved with creatures no scripture had dared describe. He had aged faster than his years. Too much wisdom is a form of curse. His hollow-eyed counselors still murmured about treaties with Phoenicia, about the new temple just completed, about the ritual to welcome a stranger. But Solomon knew this was not a visit. It was a summoning. She came from the south. No guide, no army, only eyes cold as a cut made by sand, and an entourage carrying gold, incense, gemstones, and questions so terrible, even the priesthood trembled. Makeda, to the world, she was the Queen of Sheba, but in scorched scrolls found at Qumran. Her name was written in blood Lemkt, the blade of Cush. She did not come to learn, she came to measure. For in her kingdom, thousands of miles to the south, there existed another version of the covenant, not etched in stone, but carved into living bone. You say you hold the Ark? Makeda asked. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't rushed. It was a blade, sharpened for 1,000 years, now placed against the throat of kings. Solomon smirked, but his fingers shook. I don't just say it, I keep it. She leaned back, her gaze crawling along the stone walls where oil lamps cast their shadows. Keep it as one keeps the word of God, or as a ruler hides a truth, too vast for his own bloodline. Silence slithered into the room like a serpent. Solomon had never been spoken to this way, but he wasn't angry. He was afraid because she was right. That night, they didn't lie together out of lust, nor for alliance, but as the ancients once did beside the fire, beneath no sky, with sacred oils on the skin, and prayers whispered in forgotten tongues. Not a union of flesh, but of flame and dust. Her blood carried the desert. His blood carried the fire of the mountain. And when they mingled, the child that would come would belong to neither Jerusalem nor Sheba. He would bear 2 keys, one for the temple of man, and one for the vault of forgotten gods. Makeda left on the dawn of the 7th day. No farewell. But she carried a curse. In her sleeve, a scroll inked with Solomon's blood. In her womb, a child who could stare into the sun and not go blind. And in her heart the dread that Israel would never accept such blood. She returned to Axum.
It's not a box.
And vanished from the pages Rome approved.
A vow.
But the Ge'ez still tell. The priests of Beta Israel still remember. And on the flanks of eternal Dalol, the priestesses still whisper the name Menelik, child of the divine in the exiled land. 30 years later, envoys from Ethiopia returned to Jerusalem. They did not demand gold. They did not demand land. They came for one thing only, the Ark of the Covenant. For your blood, King Solomon, now flows through us. They said, and that blood has the right to touch the throne of God. The elders protested. The priests went mad. Solomon said nothing. And when night fell,
We were only ever
the Ark
dust
vanished
on
from
its
the
lid.
temple without a sound,
No scriptures,
without a drop of blood.
no
It was not
teachers,
stolen, it followed the blood,
just blood,
and that blood now
remembering.
pulses through Ethiopia. Since then, no one has seen the Ark again. The temple was destroyed by Babylon. Jerusalem fell into enemy hands, but Ethiopia stood. For they held something the world would kneel to possess, the beating heart of the covenant.
This mark
Inside the chapel
was
of
never
Mar
a
Sion,
wound.
where light has never entered, a
It's a
gaunt
name.
guardian has knelt for 47 years, never leaving his post. He knows no English, knows naught of the Vatican. Only this: if he dies, another will be chosen immediately. The Ark may not be moved, may not be opened, may not be called
No
by
one
its
was
true
burned.
name, the name
No
known
one
only to
punished.
fire and thunder.
Only a
For if that
question
name
ever,
is spoken,
will you
the heart
dare
of God will beat again, and mankind will not survive the sound. No one buried the guardian of the Ark, not because they forgot, but because there was no body left to bury. That year, Axum saw no rain. The earth cracked open
God
like claw marks from a
remembers your
giant
face.
beast. A scream rose from the chapel of Mar Sion. No one dared go inside.
He is no longer
And by
a
morning,
soldier.
the guardian was gone, only a neat circle
He
of
is the
gray
image.
ash remained,
They return
untouched
not
by
for
wind.
vengeance,
The chamber
but
was
to
still
finish
locked,
a ritual
the Ark still in
interrupted.
place. No one knew what had happened, except for a blind
covenant
elder named
breathes.
Gabra Meskel, who had once kept the same vigil,
And the spirit
a generation
rise.
before.
If you're
He
still
heard the
here,
calling, Gabra said, his fingers trembling on a
perhaps
rosary of
something in
black
you has
wood,
just been touched.
and his soul no longer belonged to flesh. In Axum, there are no cemeteries. They do not bury the guardians, because death, to them, is not an ending, it is a second covenant. Those chosen to guard the Ark live in absolute silence. No wives, no names. Every step they take is part of a ritual, and when they die, they vanish, leaving nothing behind, as if the covenant itself swallows those who keep it. From above, the chapel of Mar Sion is no larger than a grave, but beneath it, tunnels
It's
lead
not a
deeper
box.
than the veins of the
a
Simeon
breath.
Mountains. No one knows where they
vow.
go,
Betrayed.
only that. Once,
It's not
a team of
box,
Italians
it's a
brought
breath.
seismic instruments in 1938.
Vow.
9 men, 9 days,
It's not a box.
not one
It's a
returned.
breath.
There is a secret
A
saying
vow.
among the Beta Israel of Gondar.
The door
Jerusalem
that
is the
leads
summit, but
no
Axum is the
hands
root.
touch them.
They believe the soul
command
of the
was
covenant,
spoken.
Ruach Adonai, left the Holy Land when human hearts turned filthy,
Like a soul
and like a wounded
swimming
bird,
through air.
that spirit flew back to the first place that dared to
Light
call
poured
God
out
by his
like a
true
soul
name
swimming
in a
through
black
air.
tongue. Older than Hebrew. Not Yahweh, not Jehovah, but Tazari the
were
One,
only ever
burned
the
by his
dust on
own
its lid.
fire. In a monastery hidden behind the falls of Tis Isat, there is a stone engraving no one dares reveal.
just blood,
The last man to see the
remembering.
Ark and live, forgot his own name. He became a pale shadow, did not eat, did not speak. Each night, he circled the chapel 3 times, stopping at each corner, pressing his forehead to the
This
ground,
mark
and repeating a
was never a
phrase in a
wound.
language that no longer exists. Young monks feared him, but the elders bowed whenever he passed. They knew this was no longer a man. This was a scar left by the covenant. In 1997, an anthropologist named Dr. Elias Guerra secretly recorded 19 minutes of footage capturing a strange phenomenon during the consecration of a new guardian. Every candle in the chapel extinguished at once, though no wind was felt. A deep sound rose from beneath the floor like stone drums beaten by ancestral hands. And the new guardian, a young man named Daniel, wept without stopping for 49 hours after his first encounter with the Ark.
God
No one touched him,
remembers your face.
no one asked him anything. Because tradition says each guardian hears a different sentence from inside the Ark. And that
He
sentence
is no longer
will
a
become either the
sorcerer.
curse or the salvation of an entire
He
generation.
is the bridge.
Daniel never revealed what he
They
heard,
return not for
but in his
vengeance,
final journal leaked by a
to
dying
finish a
French
ritual
priest, he wrote
interrupted.
just 3 lines. I saw fire beneath water.
The
I
covenant
heard the crying
breathes.
of metal. And I know when Jerusalem demands the Ark
Spirits
again,
rise.
blood
They're
will
still
pour
here.
from the head of the Vatican. Since then, Axum
Perhaps
has been
something in you
sealed
has
tighter
just been
than ever.
touched.
No journalist is allowed near the chapel. UNESCO quietly declined to designate the site. And all Vatican reports on the relics of the First Covenant remain sealed indefinitely. They call it superstition, but those who come near the chapel always return with strange tales. Cameras fail, watches stop, and dreams repeat visions of a burning ark carried by faceless men. In the oldest priestly traditions of Axum, the covenant is not an object. The covenant is a living memory. It remembers every hand that touched it. It remembers every vow betrayed.
It's not
And
a
it will
box.
only remain where the land
breath.
still holds the true memory of
vow.
God.
Betrayed.
That is why Jerusalem lost it. That is why Rome will never have it.
It's a
And that is why Ethiopia still stands whole.
betrayed.
Gondar, once known as the Black
It's not a
Jerusalem,
box.
a place where priests could read both Ge'ez and ancient
vow.
Sumerian symbols,
Betrayed.
where Beta Israel children were taught to tell thunder in the sky from tremors deep in the
No
earth,
command was
where there once existed a replica of the covenant not written in letters,
light poured
but in the
out
veins
like a
of
sword
living men.
swimming through
And that
air.
place was burned for 3 days by those who came in the name of light.
Poured out
In
like a soul
1937,
swimming through
Mussolini ordered the civilizing of Ethiopia, not to bring enlightenment, but to erase the final soul Africa still remembered.
its lid.
Among the secret targets sent from the Vatican to Italian forces was a single name,
No teachers.
Haile Meora, the last guardian of the First Covenant. Haile was not a king, not a priest, just a black man in the highlands of Gondar, his back tattooed with 72 covenant sigils passed from father to son for 1,800 years. The villagers called him the Sleepless One. Each
Was never a
night,
wound.
he sat before a stone shaped like a chest,
It's a name.
eyes wide open, as if waiting for something to rise from the soil. No one dared approach, but the sick, the wounded, the mothers of stillborns, they came to place a hand upon his shoulder, because they believed Haley's blood could remember the first
No one
promise,
was burned.
the one no surviving
punished.
scripture had ever dared write.
Only
The
a
Italians
Christian
came to
echo.
Gondar
Will you
unannounced.
dare call
They burned
him?
villages, torched churches, ripped sacred books. One special unit had a single order: bring Haley's body to Rome, or bring the covenant he guards at any cost. They came to his home in the night. But when they broke down the door,
God
Haile was gone.
remembers your
In his place, a
face.
perfect circle of ash, and in the center, a stone slab marked with symbols never decoded.
He is no
3
longer
were
a
carved
soldier.
there: an eye bleeding, an overturned
the
torch,
bridge.
and a name,
They return
Menelik,
not for
bloodline of
vengeance,
God.
But to
By
finish
dawn,
a ritual interrupted.
7 of the 12 soldiers had gone mad, tearing their own faces,
The covenant
screaming of a
breathes,
box that speaks. They were
and
gagged,
the spirits
flown to the Vatican.
rise.
No one heard of
You're
them
still
again.
here.
A Belgian priest named Claude van Herken secretly
Perhaps something
documented the
in you has
aftermath
just
in
been touched.
Gondar. He wrote, "That man did not die. He set himself on fire, using only his blood. I saw flame rise from his back, and yet no fire was there." Claude carried a charred scrap of cloth. On it, a black handprint with 3 fingers. And the words, "I do not keep the covenant. I am the covenant." He tried to send it to Belgium, but was arrested at the Sudanese border. His name was erased from Vatican records. His works vanished from Leuven's libraries. Only the story survived, passed down by a mixed-race novice who later became a hidden priest in
It's not a
Axum.
box.
In 1982, a brown-skinned girl from
A vow.
Gondar,
Betrayed.
chosen as the next guardian, dreamed
Box.
of Haile.
It's a breath.
He was neither young nor
A
old.
vow.
He stood between 2 gates of fire. and said just one line.
It's a breath.
If Rome still clings to the lie, then my blood will reopen memory. The next day, the small chapel where she trained burned to ash.
No command.
Her body was never found. Only footprints remained bleeding,
Light poured
yet the
out
skin
like
was
a soul,
unbroken.
swimming
Ancient
through
texts
air.
of Beta Israel say the original covenant was not two tablets. It was sacred breath from a source with no name passed through the bloodline of the first black soul to walk through the thunder of Sinai. Their ancestors called it the female spirit,
No
Shekinah,
scriptures.
living inside the womb of memory.
No teachers.
And in every generation,
Just
there would be
blood,
one whose blood
remembering.
carried that primal voice even if the world denied it. Even if history twisted its spine. The story of Haile and the covenant blood is still whispered during Black Moon rites in the Highlands, where only women and newborns are allowed.
This
There,
mark,
they place
Never a
hands upon
wound.
foreheads and pass down this
it's a
chant.
name.
The one who keeps the word needs no script. True memory needs no scripture. And when the wind rises, the children tremble not from cold, but because they feel the beating of a chest no one can see. Today, Gondar is just a
No one
scar,
was burned.
but beneath the
No
earth,
one punished.
they say a stone chamber still remains,
Only a question
where Haley's
echoed.
blood has soaked
Will you
into the
dare
rock.
call?
Each year, on the day he vanished, a strange plant grows from the ash. It blooms only one flower, blood red, no petals, no stem. The people call it the guardian's heart. Not everyone believes the covenant still exists,
Remembers your face.
but the Vatican does, so deeply. In fact, they created a division in the dark utterly separate from
He is no
cardinals,
longer a soldier.
popes, or any public branch of church.
He is the bridge.
Its internal name, Filii
return
Sanguinis,
not
Sons
for
of the Blood,
vengeance,
its true name,
to finish
hasn't
the
been
ritual
spoken since
of the
1511. Their mission is singular: destroy anyone who carries the true memory of the original covenant, the one never edited by Moses, never translated by Babylonian hands. In 1973, along the border of Eritrea and Ethiopia, a massacre erased a village named Adwa. No oil, no military base, only a small black Jewish community, Beta Israel, sustained by ritual and whispered prayer. Survivors spoke of it, unmarked plains, soldiers in black, no insignia. They searched every house, burned all texts in Ge'ez, and hanged upside down every child with a red mark at the nape of the neck. No newspapers reported it, no international agency investigated. Because to the Vatican, the village never existed. 3 months later, a surviving woman named Atara escaped to Djibouti and begged a Muslim cleric for asylum. She spoke of pale men with silver blades that sliced through stone without sound. She spoke of her father, keeper of a cloth said to bear Solomon's own handwriting. And she said a sentence that kept the cleric silent till dawn. They didn't kill us for our faith. They killed us because our blood remembers what Scripture forgot. 3 days later, Atara vanished from the camp. No blood, just a pair of black cloth slippers neatly placed outside her tent. Filii Sanguinis is not a secret society. They do not recruit, they break and rebuild. From childhood, orphans chosen for initiation are locked underground for 40 nights, forced to listen to scripture read backwards in burning Latin. Those who survive are no longer human. They call it the baptism of forgetting by blood. Leaked documents in 1999 from a former French priest revealed the truth. This group has its own budget, its own weapons cache, and a kill list of names meant to be erased from history. Top of the list: Beta Israel, the African priesthood, bloodline of Menelik, descendants of Solomon and Sheba,
Never a wound.
the nameless guardians of Axum,
It's a
Gondar,
name.
and Lalibela. The original covenant etched in blood on black hide. In the 7th basement of Castel Gandolfo, a monastery where a pope once hid after an assassination attempt, a map is kept. It shows no nations,
No one
no
was burned.
rivers, no seas,
punished.
only red dots marking where the covenant
Only a
has surfaced
question
across
echoed.
generations.
Will you dare call
Ethiopia burns brightest, 3 points especially. Oh, Mar Sion, where the Ark sleeps.
I remember.
Gondar, where the bloodline lies. Lalibela, where 11 rock-hewn
remembers your
churches
face.
form the arm of God. A handwritten note in the bottom corner reads, "If Menelik's blood meets the relic,
He is no longer
Rome
a
will fall
soldier.
before dawn." In 1987, a
is
young
the
German
bridge.
priest named Thomas
They
Behrens
return not for
secretly
vengeance,
translated the Book of Ash,
but to
a hidden
finish a
Vatican
ritual
text chronicling its covert campaigns in Africa. One passage read,
The covenant
"It is not that we do
breathes.
not believe in God, we fear that God is not
Spirits
white."
rise.
Thomas vanished within St. Peter's Basilica 2 weeks after sending the translation to a
Perhaps something in you
Ghanaian
has
scholar
just been
named
touched.
Kojo Mensah. Mensah survived a mysterious house fire, but was blinded in both eyes. His final words before falling silent forever: "I saw the covenant weep." Today, those who carry Shekinah's blood no longer dare call themselves guardians. They live as commoners, teachers, healers, farmers. But when wind rises, they place a hand over their chest as if calming something stirring within. They need no proof, because blood remembers, and memory requires no permission to exist. In the mists of the Simeon Mountains, where clouds smothered the sky during monsoon, a tale still circulates of an 11-year-old child who speaks fluent Ge'ez and Aramaic without ever learning.
It's a breath.
When asked its name, the child replied, "My name will be spoken when the covenant opens.
It's not a box.
Until then, just call me Memory." The child vanished a week after UN officials arrived. And now, each time a black soul dies in a ritual no outsider understands, a candle is lit in the Vatican's deepest vaults, not to pray, but to count. For Fili Sanguinis does not fear faith. They fear only one thing, that one day, true blood will rise and call God by its own tongue. There are places not built by human hands, not shaped by time, not bound by
No
gravity.
scriptures,
Places called sacred
No
because even the
teachings.
stone knows how to kneel.
just blood.
Lalibela is one such place, high in the Ethiopian plateau, where clouds walk on their knees. 11 colossal churches rise like God's fingerprints, pressed into red basalt. Not raised up, but carved down. From above, each rooftop is a scar in the earth, connected by catacombs, underground corridors, and sacrificial wells. No mortar in the walls, no joints in the columns. The ceilings bear arms outstretched, reaching for each other, in darkness. They call it the Second Jerusalem, but in the ancient inscriptions, hidden within Beta Golgotha,
No one was
a
burned.
monastery where no woman
one
has
punished.
entered for 1,000 years, it
Only
bears
a
another
question
name.
echoed.
Yad
Will you dare
HaElohim,
call
the arm of God. Legend says King Lalibela was guided by angels in a dream. He walked through stone halls, heard songs not sung by men. When he awoke, he commanded the churches to be carved
God
as they had appeared in the
remembers your
vision.
face.
But the people did not believe him. They had seen the light beneath the earth before the king was ever born. An elder
no
priest
longer a
named
soldier.
Alamurota this, hidden beneath the statue
the
at
bridge.
Beta Mariam. We did not build Lalibela. We unearthed what had already been buried, and the deepest place must never be touched. That place is Beit Medhain Alam, the largest church, home to 72 stone pillars etched with axes and burning
You're
hands.
still here.
Beneath its floor lies a sealed tunnel no one dares
Perhaps
descend.
something in you has
Only
just
the
been
guardians,
touched.
those who carry Shekinah's blood, can hear the first question that echoes there each night. Who are you to keep the memory of me? In 1960, a French expedition was granted access beneath Beit Gabriel Raphael. They found a circular room where sound never died. At its center, a black stone altar, smooth as glass, no dust, no cobwebs, and above it a strange hollow, shaped precisely like the base of the Ark of the Covenant as described in Exodus 25. The dig was halted immediately. The team was expelled from Ethiopia. One archaeologist, Jean Lefebvre, wrote in her suicide note, "I saw what makes Rome tremble. The covenant is not an object. It is a shape waiting for its owner to return." In Axum's priestly tradition, there is an ancient word, kibra, the place where a soul dwells after being severed from its blood. Lalibela is the last kibra. Here, descendants of Menelik gather every 7 years, not to pray, but to listen to stone. They sit silently in narrow corridors, ears pressed to the walls. And if the covenant soul accepts them, the stone will speak, not in words, but in heartbeat. There was a 12-year-old boy, Sele born of a lost line of guardians. He came to Lalibela in 2001. No one taught him. No one guided him.
No scriptures.
Yet he found the vault of Beta Gabriel, a place no one dared enter.
Just blood.
He laid his hand upon the wall. Blood wept from his eyes, and his lips whispered, "The covenant is not meant to be kept. It is meant to summon a memory ripped from mankind." From that day forward, he never spoke again. But each night, he wrote with his left hand symbols no one could read, except one blind elder in the monastery. That elder translated them line by line, then burned the pages in silence. They called it the language of stone. The Vatican knows Lalibela. Since the 15th century, they have sent covert priests disguised as pilgrims. None have survived more than 30 days. Some went mad, some set themselves on fire, some vanished into the very rock corridors, as if swallowed whole. A restricted report from the Vatican's Institute of Esoteric Theology states, Lalibela is the only place on earth where human blood and God's memory touch without miracle. If the covenant returns, this will be its mouth. But the people of Lalibela do not fear. They do not keep the stone. They keep the stone's secret so none may break it. Each dark moon, they bury the ashes of former priests in the corridor between Bet Amenuel and Beta Kedus Mercureus. No names carved, no tombstones raised. Only breath blended into rock. Because only those without name scan return when the covenant calls. And one day, when the churches tremble without quake, when water rises from the well to the sky, and when the stone arm in Beta Golgotha stretches toward Axum. The final one will be chosen. Not a king, not a priest, but the one who remembers his true name. No one knows his name, no papers, no birth date, not a single photograph exists to prove he ever lived. Yet in Axum, whenever the wind shifts, children point towards the chapel of Mar Sion and whisper, "That man is the one the covenant chose." He did not speak, he did not smile, he did not age. His eyes always stared into nothing as if watching a parallel world run alongside this one. The only time he moved was at sunset. He took exactly 33 steps, knelt, placed his forehead to the ground, hand over heart, repeated this 7 times, then vanished into the night as if he had never been there. In 2008, a Kenyan journalist named Achieng Muranda secretly approached him to uncover the truth of the covenant. She didn't speak Ge'ez, didn't follow the faith. She brought only a recorder, a torn Bible, and a lifelong ache that whispered, "God is not in the Vatican." For 3 days, he never looked at her. On the 4th day, as she prepared to leave, he stepped forward and gently placed a single finger on her forehead. In that instant, her recorder exploded. She collapsed, unconscious for 3 days. When she awoke, she had forgotten English, forgotten her family's faces, remembered only one sentence, in a language she had never learned. No one needs to prove what is already flowing through their blood. She left journalism, moved into a small monastery near Lalibela. She began writing hundreds of journals by hand with no recognizable script, no known language. Scholars called it linguistic disassociation. But priests in Axum silently bowed when they read it, because they knew the covenant had chosen another. That man, the guardian, needed no ceremony, no ordination, no council's blessing, because the covenant knows when its blood draws near. Some said they saw him once, standing before the ark, bare-handed, eyes closed, smiling. Not burned, not mad, not dead. When asked, why wasn't he consumed like the others? An old monk whispered. Because fire does not burn what once was part of itself. A 2012 internal memo from Fili Sanguinis read, Target 317 male, age undetermined, no known replicas, no fingerprints, no data, capability direct contact with the Ark, without anomalies. Advisory. Do not engage. Do not breach Axum while subject is alive. Threat level structural destabilization of biblical theology. The Vatican remained silent. They did not recognize him. They did not deny him. Because to deny what cannot die is to blaspheme the very faith they cling to. Once, the Nameless One was asked in writing, "What is the covenant?" He replied with a single scrap of paper, written in blood. It is the first cry of humanity when it realized it had not been abandoned. There was one time he left the chapel, the only time. He wandered into the Axum market, barefoot, tattered, empty-handed. No one recognized him. Children thought him a beggar. A young girl approached and offered him bread. He knelt, placed his hand on her head, and whispered something. That night she dreamed of a sea of pale faces screaming and her holding a glowing box that beat like a heart. From that day on, she spoke fluent Ge'ez, though she had never been taught. And every year, on that same day, blood poured from her nose, though no wound could be found. The Nameless One lived 13 more years after that. Then one morning, he did not emerge from the chapel. The doors stayed closed. No one went in. But from beneath the wooden threshold, a single ray of light crept out like a living candle. And for 7 nights, stone drums echoed from below. When the priests finally opened the door, there was no body, no blood, only a silhouette of ash kneeling and a handwritten note. It is time the Ark had a name, not to be called, but to call. Since then, Mar Sion has chosen no new guardian, because the one who must now guard it is no longer outside the Ark. Far across the sea, in a warehouse in New Jersey, USA. A black theology professor opened an old crate from Ethiopia. Inside, a faded copy of ancient Ge'ez symbols, dried blood, a hand-stitched cloth. The words embroidered read, "The Nameless One is called. Now, it's your turn."
It's a name.
He didn't understand. But that night, he dreamed. A stone room, a faceless man, a voice low, slow. "Your name is not what your parents gave you. It is what your blood remembers when it calls God in its own tongue."
No one was burned.
He woke in tears,
No one punished.
because for the first time in his life, he no longer felt like a stranger in God's house. In Newark, New Jersey, where smoke-stained brick buildings crowd together like unburied tombs, there lived a man named Ezra McCall. He taught theology at a local community college, not famous. No titles, no citations. Only one strange thing whenever he lectured on the Old Testament. He wept. No one understood why, not emotion, not grief, just something. And every line made his blood tremble. Ezra was the son of a Baptist pastor and a mother who once nursed the wounded in the civil rights movement. They named him after a prophet, hoping he would rebuild the temple that had fallen. But growing up in the projects, where police sirens screamed through prayer and churches became liquor stores, Ezra saw no temple worth rebuilding. He saw gospel with no soul, scripture with no soil, a God trapped in words that couldn't speak his mother's tongue. Then one October night in 2019, Ezra dreamed. He stood inside a stone chamber, black walls, no doors. At his feet, an old wooden box, light leaking through its seams. He didn't touch it, didn't open it. He just listened. A thump, slow, soft. The rhythm of a heart that had never stopped beating. A voice rose from beneath the ground. "Your name is not Ezra. That is a chain." He woke up, chest aching as if someone had reached in and pulled blood out by hand. From that night on, Ezra began dreaming in symbols. No more images, no more sound. Only streams of characters like serpents crawling through his mind every time he closed his eyes. Dots, marks, lines, then language, then writing. Friends thought he was unraveling, until a linguist from Ghana happened to glimpse Ezra's notebook in a library and froze. "This is Ge'ez. You've rewritten a lost passage from the original Kebra Nagast. The Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings, was the sacred chronicle of Solomon and Sheba's bloodline. It had been translated, distorted, and rewritten for centuries. But Ezra's passage had never been seen before. One line read, "Blood from the land of chains shall reignite the fire where the covenant sleeps.
Just blood.
And when the black man speaks his true name, the white walls will shatter from within." Ezra began preaching off the record. Between classes, in diners, on city buses, telling black folk. Moses wasn't white. Sheba was no myth.
This mark.
God didn't speak Latin
is never a
first.
wound.
He spoke in the heartbeat of Africa. One winter
It's a
night,
name.
as snow buried the sidewalks, Ezra received a package. No sender. Inside a weathered cloth from Ethiopia, hand-stitched with Ge'ez script. "The Nameless One has called. Now it's your turn." Ezra collapsed, gripping the cloth,
No one was burned.
eyes shut,
No one punished.
breath shallow. And for the first time in his
Only a
life,
question echoed.
he heard his
Who is
blood
the
calling
daredevil?
back. 3 days later, Ezra resigned, sold his books, shut off his phone, vanished from New Jersey. The last to see him was a Somali student working at the train station. He said, "Torsotoshanam."
God remembers your face.
He stood there like he was waiting for a train. But no train came. Eyes
He is
forward,
no longer a soldier.
cloth in hand, like he was holding his own heart.
He is the bridge.
And I heard him whisper,
They
"If the
return
covenant
not
won't
for
return,
vengeance,
then I'll bring my
but
blood closer
finish
to it."
the ritual in
A year later, in a hidden monastery, in the Semien Mountains of Ethiopia, a blind monk sent a letter to New Jersey. Signed Sala, the one who writes in stone. The letter held only 2 lines. "Ezra has arrived, but that is not the name the covenant calls." It was received by Ezra's mother. She wept, because she knew the son she named Ezra was gone. But someone else lived on, someone whose true name had never been spoken aloud in any American church. And that name was memory rising from a shackled bloodline. Back in the Newark projects, where Ezra once taught, children now gather once a week to listen to his old recordings. They don't call it preaching, they call it listening to our blood. Each child takes a Ge'ez name. Each rewrites the Bible in their own voice, and each one dreams of a stone room with a heart still beating. One child, barely 10, asked his mother,
It's a breath.
"If the covenant is in Ethiopia,
vow.
does God still know I'm being forgotten in America?" The mother didn't answer.
It's a breath.
She just held him close,
A vow.
because somewhere,
Betrayed.
she too could hear the rhythm of her own blood begin to
It's not a
speak.
box.
No one can summon the
It's a
covenant,
breath.
but if blood calls loud
A
enough,
vow.
it will open the door.
Betrayed.
And Axum, once marked on colonial maps as an unidentified black dot, had begun to
no
tremble.
command was
Not from
spoken.
earthquakes, not from war, but from footsteps that needed no
Light
passport
poured
to
out
return.
like a soul.
In June 2020, at Bole Airport in Addis Ababa, security detained a black man with an American passport. His name, Malik Darnell. Reasons. No return ticket, no listed accommodation, no local contact.
No
What brings you
scriptures,
here? Home. You're not Ethiopian. I don't have to be a person.
just
I am
blood
memory.
remembering.
Malik was a former U.S. Marine, a veteran of Iraq. He left the military with PTSD. At first, he thought he was losing his mind. Every night he dreamed of a red stone hill where a blind man touched his forehead and asked, "Why do you fight for a country that cannot even call you by your true name?" He awoke each time with his heart pounding. His sweat smelled not of salt, but of incense, warm blood, and the damp stone of deep places. After 3 years of fleeing hospitals, therapists, and every treatment, Malik booked a one-way ticket to Ethiopia.
No one was burned.
He knew no one there.
No one punished.
On the flight, an Eritrean woman asked,
Only a question
"First
echoed.
time going home?"
Will you dare call
He smiled. "No, just the first time remembering at the airport." He didn't panic. He quietly unzipped his bag and handed over a cloth stitched in blood bearing a Ge'ez sigil, a double-headed flame. The young officer recoiled, called his
Remembers your
superior,
face.
the commander, thin, old, with a hand-carved cross, studied Malik for a long
He
time,
is no longer a soldier.
then whispered, "Some people return without proof.
He
Their
is the
blood
bridge.
speaks to the land."
They returned
They didn't
not
stop
for
him.
vengeance,
They didn't question. They only
to finish
bowed.
a ritual
One soldier
interrupted.
walked him to the exit and said, "Welcome, bearer of the covenant."
Covenant breathes.
To the north, the road to Axum was still rough, a spine of stone in mist.
Rise.
No
You're
maps,
still
no
here.
signs. But everyone who saw Malik pass bowed quietly and
Perhaps
murmured,
something in you has just been
"The one who
touched.
remembers his name has come back." He didn't speak the language. He didn't need to. In Axum, language is not on the lips. It flows through the veins. At the gate of the chapel of Mar Sion, the elder guardian was already waiting. No surprise, no joy. He simply reached out and received the blood-stitched cloth Malik had brought from New Jersey. They didn't speak. They touched foreheads. In that instant, two epochs touched, and something surged from beneath the ground, not sound but memory, in frequency. The guardian nodded, stepped back, opened the door. For the first time in 83 years, the stone gate of the chapel opened without a key. Malik entered,
It's not a box.
alone.
It's a breath.
No cameras, no light,
A vow.
only the scent of something ancient waking up.
It's not a box.
Inside a dark
It's a
wooden
breath.
chest lay, still like the chest of a sleeping god.
Betrayed.
No fire, no
Was
glow,
opened.
but in Malik's
No
heart,
hands
a
touched
pulse answered.
them. No
Not
command
loud,
spoken.
not painful, just whole, as if one part of his blood had finally found the other. The guardian did not enter. The covenant does not allow two bloodlines to live in the room at once. Minutes later, the door opened. Malik emerged. No words, no tears. He placed his hand over his heart and breathed.
No scriptures,
Long, slow, like someone who'd returned after 3,000 years in exile.
just blood
From that day on,
remembering.
no one saw Malik leave Ethiopia. No records, no photos. Only the elders say, the covenant bearer has returned, not to carry the ark away, but to remind the world it was never gone. At that same moment, in cities across America,
Mark
France,
was never a wound.
Brazil, where the African diaspora lives in fragments, a
name.
strange phenomenon began. Children dreamed of stone churches. Adults bled from the noseat, the sound of djembe drums, and many began to write with their left hand, symbols no one could read. A black woman in Detroit woke
No one was
screaming,
burned.
"I am
No
not
one
Deborah.
punished.
I am the name of an ancestor
Only a
that was
question
never
echoed.
written down."
Will you dare
They
call
formed blood circles, not churches, not religions, just people remembering something for which no word exists. They called themselves the Return Without Borders. And in Axum, each night, the chapel of Mar Sion
God
glows
remembers
with a
your
faint
face.
light like a heartbeat beneath skin. No one knows why, but those who once touched the ashes
no
of the
longer a
nameless
soldier.
one say only this: The covenant is beginning to open its eyes because its blood has found its way home. The covenant was never a thing. It was the living will of a promise betrayed, an ancient sigh that never stopped, a gaze, still waiting to be awakened from stone,
If you're still here,
from blood, from the voice of ancestors. And on that night in Axum, after 3,000 years, the covenant opened its eyes. No thunder, no pillar of flame, just a silence that was no longer silence. The doors of Mar Sion opened themselves at midnight. No hands touched them. No command was spoken. The new guardian. Malik sat against the stone, eyes half closed, but from his chest, a red glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. It wasn't blood, it wasn't fire, it was memory luminous, not yet formed into language, but anyone who saw it trembled from a recognition deeper than bone. Inside the Ark room, the wooden box no longer sat sealed, its lid lifted just a finger's width, but light poured out like a soul swimming through air. Old priests bowed prostrate outside, too still to breathe,
it's a breath.
not from fear, but because they knew what was rising now was no longer something to be guarded, but a will to which all must surrender. The covenant no longer needed a guardian. It needed someone to remember. At that very moment, in Detroit, New Jersey, Bahia, Accra, Kingston, Marseille, places where the blood of Sheba and Solomon had been severed from its source, spontaneous rituals began. No instructors, no script, no doctrine, just black people
No scriptures.
placing hands on their hearts, kneeling to
Just
the
blood,
earth,
remembering.
whispering the names of ancestors they had never met. And their blood began to tremble as if some part of them was being summoned from inside an ancient box. In Atlanta, a little girl screamed in her sleep, speaking ancient Ge'ez. I don't want to go, but the Ark is opening its eyes and it's calling me by my true name. Her mother recorded it, sent it to doctors. No one understood. But in Axum, Malik was trembling, murmuring the exact same words in the same voice as the child. Tazari Nahil, a name erased from every book, the true name of the soul inside the covenant. Not Jehovah, not Yahweh, not El Shaddai, but a being that remembers, that feels pain, that never left Africa. When the eyes of the covenant opened, no one saw pupils, no whites, just the sensation of being fully seen, as if every lie ever told about God was being pulled backward through humanity's throat. No one was burned, no one punished. Only a single question echoed through the blood of everyone who had ever called him God. Will you dare call me in the language of your blood? In the Vatican, a bell tower collapsed at 3 Oudror.
The covenant breathes,
M,
and the
with no
spirits
quake
rise.
reported.
If you're still
A cardinal stood frozen, eyes wide, pointing to a wall where the name Menelikad cracked through the stone. The priests rushed in. He could only utter one sentence before blood poured from his ears. We kept the wrong Ark, because the Ark never left the place it belonged. In Angola Prison, Louisiana, where most inmates are black, a death row prisoner paused mid-prayer. He began to weep, writing on the wall in his own blood. I remember, I am not a slave name. I am a forgotten guardian, and God remembers my face. 3 hours later, he was released. New evidence found in a lost recording from nowhere. No explanation. But as he walked free, he looked up and said,
It's a breath.
"The covenant has seen me.
A vow
Now it's my turn
betrayed.
to see the world through its eyes." In Axum's stone chamber, Malik knelt,
A vow
no longer a soldier,
betrayed.
no longer an American,
It's not a
nothing but the
box.
living bridge between
It's a
past and
breath.
the untold.
A
The covenant
vow
gave no speech,
betrayed.
issued no command,
The doors
It simply breathed.
No
And from
hands
that
touched
breath, the spirits of
them. No
ancestors
command
hanged,
spoken.
sold, burned, silenced,
Poured
began
out
to
like
return.
soul.
Not for vengeance, not to reclaim thrones, but to finish a ritual interrupted.
Light
A ritual
poured
to
out
call
like
God back,
soul
but this time,
streamed through air.
not with Roman liturgy, not with wine, not with wafers, but with the true name of our own
Ever
blood.
the dust on
And if
its
you're
lid.
still here, perhaps something in
No
you's just been
scriptures.
touched in its deepest place.
No
At
teachers.
Tales of Black, each
Just
story
blood,
is a ritual,
remembering.
a reminder. There are memories not written in books but etched in bone and blood. If something stirred in you while listening, share this. Someone out there may be hearing their blood calling too. Subscribe to never miss the next rite. And if you carry a legend, a memory, or a haunting, leave it in the comments. Perhaps your story will be summoned in the next ceremony.